Right. So again, tonight for the long distance running pre-season webinar, we'll talk about our updated COVID protocol, which has been new in the last couple weeks. Talk about the events that are offered this year, certifications and medicals that need to be in place before you practice this season. Talk about the deadlines, training and qualifying events offered this year, the rules, kind of some general reminders there as there's no additional rule changes, and then leave it open for questions at the end. Since this is not a packed content-based preseason webinar like we had the hour-and-a-half ones before, if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question after we're done a section or something. Feel free to also put it in the chat box. I have that pulled up here and I'll try to address that as soon as it comes in. At the end of the slide deck, it's also a bunch of forms that you can refer back to. Has to do with medical forms, protest forms, I believe, also a bunch of things that are just great references in case you have a question about a certain form. So with the updated protocol, this is recent as of a few weeks ago, some exciting news. So to give you the broad picture here, this is going to be based off entire state of Maryland, and we're looking at cases per 100,000. So as of last week, we were at 3 per 100,000. If we are under 10, we'll talk about what that pertains as we move on here, but that's what we're looking at, cases per 100,000, not in specific counties. That's going to be based across the state of Maryland there. So for the time being, we are not suspending any in-person programming. We are encouraging that. We hope that we can stay in that same way for the future. There is the possibility, of course, that we will have to revoke that and jump back some hoops before we can jump forward again, but we'll see and keep you touch base there on any updates that come up. So moving on to the next slide here. So before we talked about different phases, now coming from SOI, we now have the low risk, moderate risk, and significant risk categories. So now we're down to 3, a little simplified, which is great. So again, we're looking at cases per 100,000 here. So 10 or less, or 80% or more of our participants are fully vaccinated. That will keep us in the low risk category. So if we are above, say, 11 cases per 100,000, but 80% of our participants are fully vaccinated, we would still stay within that low risk category. And we'll talk a little bit more about vaccinations as we proceed here. And that's local regulations for event size and risk mitigation. Moving on to the moderate risk and significant risk, I encourage you to read those more on your own as we have some other diagrams that'll go into details about breaking it down, if it's housing or food related, anything it covers, what that looks like in different categories here. But with moderate risk, that would be 11 to 15 and less than 80% of participants fully vaccinated. So looking at the protocols, again, we're going to look at the low risk category, which we are currently in right now. So when it comes to event size and venue type, that's going to be based on the local authority of the regulations within your county. With the additional forms, so back in March, we now have a new form called the Communicable Disease Waiver. We refer to it as CDW. Before that, it was the acknowledgement of risk that I believe you had to have in place last year. So that has been replaced with the CDW, and this form is good for 3 years. So please make sure all those are in. That can be found on the coach resource page after this webinar. Tomorrow morning, I can also include that just so it's an easy printout so you can have all your athletes take care of that and then submit that into the state office. So with the on-site screening, there is no longer a reason to do the screening process. So temperature checks do not need to be done anymore at this point. Encourage signage or other measures just to make sure that people are still aware that COVID is still alive and well. But again, hand washing, social distancing, and masking, still encouraging that. Positive COVID test or previous COVID disease. So no participants within 10 days or a positive COVID test, 7 days of any symptoms. So if anybody comes down with COVID, they need to stay away from that program for 10 days at the minimum, and that has to be 7 days without any symptoms. So athletes and unified partners should receive that medical clearance before coming back to their practice or competition. Masking, we're asking you to follow the local restrictions again there. If your athlete or yourself is not fully vaccinated, they must wear a mask except during their rigorous exercise. So warm-ups, they could take that mask off. During competition, they can take that mask off. But again, if you are not vaccinated, everyone needs to wear a mask if they are not vaccinated. On that same topic, though, I think we touched on a little bit farther down. That is not something that we're going to actively enforce. Again, this is what we're stating and asking anybody, if you are not vaccinated, please keep your mask on unless you are exercising. So distancing, just take into the active measures to ensure distancing as much as possible. I think the athletes at this point are almost more comfortable with that, as we've been doing that for a while. So to keep everybody as safe as possible, still maintain distancing when possible. Looking over at the moderate risk there, distance is required at all times. So if we were at that point, say for powerlifting, one of my other sports for Fall Fest, being a spotter there would be a lot more difficult if possible at all. But again, during the times that you are able to separate and stay socially distanced, we still are encouraging that. With transportation, private transportation is encouraged as much as possible. Anybody that is in a transportation vehicle that's Special Olympics under that umbrella, they need to wear a mask at all times. That is one person per seat. And then for buses, there's bench seats, which I believe are the ones in the back of the bus. Those are for 2 people max. With the accommodations here, looking at housing, if all individuals in the room are vaccinated, you can have up to 4 people in that room. If there's one person unvaccinated, it's a max per 2 per room, and they must be with one person that's vaccinated or from that same household. So again, one of the reasons, we'll get into it next slide. I don't want to talk about vaccinations too much yet. With the spectators, again, we're following that number permitted by the local authority. Meals, we're pretty much at our standard meal, whatever is without restrictions currently at this point. John, I was looking at you. I was thinking of snowshoeing. Obviously, at Winter Games, looking at no self-serve buffet meals or whatever, if we move into that moderate risk, as an example there. So vaccines, as of 7/27/21, which is today, they are not a requirement for participation. If we go down this road, which we currently have not started yet, regarding tracking vaccinations, it's solely for the purpose of overnight housing and tracking percent only. Again, we talked about if we're under that 80% vaccination, if we're over 80% vaccinated, but then have more than 11 cases per 100,000, then we're still in that category where we're okay and we're at that low risk. So that could help us in some regards, but again, also knowing for overnight housing and making those housing arrangements, that would be really helpful to have that. So again, currently we are not, but that is the thinking behind it. Again, that is solely private information. If you are an individual that has access to that, that is private. Then that is what we would be using that information for. The last point there, that cannot affect registration, waiting lists, etc. We're not discriminating against people that are not vaccinated. We just know that if you're not, please wear your mask. And we will not be disclosing who is and who is not to outside sources. So as a reminder, everybody needs to have a current medical or volunteer application when participating within Special Olympics Maryland, and there are no exceptions to that policy. As you all are aware, please work with your area leadership. Some of you may be the area leadership. Just checking in to make sure that all the forms are in far in advance of the training season. Checking in also on the coach's resource page. There's a page that is pulled each month where you can check the certification status of yourself or the athletes. It's a multiple page report in alphabetical order where you can find any certification there and what your status is. So what is required for each sport? As you can see, that CDW form is for everybody across the board. Athletes just need to have their athlete medical on top of that. I'm not going to read through all these, but as you move into what I believe many of you are here, the assistant coach and head coach, you need to have your concussion certification along with your assistant coach certification. If you're an assistant coach, that would be your head coach certification if you are your head coach. As a reminder, the Coaching Special Olympics Athletes course, which is offered every 2 months or so roughly, is good for life. If you've taken it before, I think that everybody that I've heard has truly enjoyed that course, and it's been helpful in a lot of different regards. So I would encourage you to take that if you have not already. That can be found in the area memo that gets sent out, I believe on the coach's resource page also.
And then Ryan, hey everyone, this is Steve. As Ryan indicated, and just wanted to drive it home as we've had some questions in some other preseason webinars about the acknowledgement of risk form. As Ryan indicated, that's no longer in place and no longer accepted, if you will. So if the questions have been in the past, well, we've already done the acknowledgement of risk, so we're good. The communicable disease waiver, as Ryan indicated, replaces that. And the acknowledgement risk form, if you've done that or if you have those are no longer in place, no longer in existence. We're not really accepting them at all. But the communicable disease waiver must be in place. So as we've had questions in previous webinars, just wanted to stress that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. So some long distance running related deadlines, and these deadlines, if you are wondering, are related to every other sport based that will be at Fall Fest this year. So the training registration deadline will be August 30th of this year. That's when all your athletes need to be entered into GMS for them to be eligible to compete at that state championship, which is tentatively at Mount St. Mary's again this year. The last date for missing forms to be submitted is going to be September 8th. So if you are an athlete, you need to have your CDW valid through October 16th. If you're a coach volunteer, you must have that completed volunteer application, protective behaviors, and your CDW through Fall Fest. All coaches and sport volunteers must have that concussion certification complete, again, through the end of Fall Fest there. And then if you are a coach, all of you must have that sport specific certification. That's the SOA course that we were talking about. No, pardon me, that sport specific certification would be coaches training. So I'll be working with Ron to get something scheduled like that. And then you also see there that you would need to complete CSOA if you are a coach. The competition registration deadline is 10/1. So that's when all the rosters must be entered into GMS. If they are not in an event at that time, they will be deleted from the competition. So here's the coaching education development progression model that we have here. This is very similar to what we showed you on that previous slide. I just wanted to be able to show you again and allow you to refer back to this if you needed to in the future. Checking the question, something came up. So from David, is the CDW what we had in the spring? I think that's what Steve addressed. Yep, that's going to be most likely different. But either way, David, you understand what the answer is, that AOR is no longer what we need. It will be that CDW for everyone that's participating. And Anger, you already covered it. I just saw it. Thank you very much. For the events offered, so we have the 1K, the 1K unified run, the 1500 meter, the 3K, 3K unified, and then also the 5K, which is also offered a unified relay.
So I am not offer a 1500 unified.
Sorry, John, go ahead.
Are we going to offer a 1500 meter where they can do it as a unified run?
I will double check with Ron and get back to you. What was the one? It was the 1500 meter unified?
Yes.
If we had athletes that were interested in doing that, I believe that we could offer that, but I will double check and get back with you.
Okay, thanks.
So as we go through here, I will not act like I am a specialist in long distance running. I am not. That's why I'm thankful to have Ron here, but do want to go through some slides here just so you're aware. So this is going to be at the Mount. Again, that's tentatively where our October 16th long distance running state competition will be. So here's where you can see the 1K course. Next time we're in communication with the new staff lead that we have out there, as Ian, unfortunately, who we were working with before, is now gone. They have lined the course for us in the past, and I'll be asking them to do that again. That's always very helpful. But looking at the same setup that we've had in the past. So the 1K course, you can see in front of you here. Moving on to the 1500 meter and the 300 meter, which would just be 2 loops here. You're going around there. So the 500 meter, this loop around that little pond, that's going to be 2 loops in total. Again, there will be orange traffic cones that we've lined some areas. As you can kind of see where that number 2 marker is there, kind of near the middle, there's some confusion as they're kind of leaving that, I believe it's gravel area there. So cones will direct the athletes exactly where to go. We have people stationed around that course to keep everybody on track. So with your qualifying competitions, the point of that is to have athletes in a competitive atmosphere as much as possible. A lot of you do a great job about that. I was out there in Washington County with John leading a practice there. And even if it wasn't a direct competition, which is separate than what we're trying to do here, it was still a lot of athletes pushing each other and trying to beat each other around, which I like to see. But the point of that qualifying competition is to get them that competitive experience, and that's what's required for the state championship. So ideally, we'll have 3 or more counties hosting competitions this year. I know we have some outside competitions that typically take place. Some of those may or may not be offered this year. That's still to be determined in some categories, but I encourage you to host your competition in your county if you've done that in the past. If you have not, I'd be happy to come out there and help you set that up and get everything rolling for you there. When you are having a competition, though, please have that sanction form submitted from your area director to me, ideally 30 days in advance. For some reason, please keep it in 30 days. I will leave it at that. That's very helpful for all the moving pieces there. And so we can notify other counties that are possibly able to also participate. So qualifying for the state tournament, you'll need to meet all those training and registration requirements and deadlines that we talked about earlier. All coaches need to have their certifications up to date. And please have a minimum of 2 sanctioned qualifying events. So 1 must be a multi-area qualifying competition. So that involves competitors from more than 1 area. And the minimum of at least 1 other competition, which can be multi-area or just your area, regional games, etc. And again, this is the minimum. So please try to offer as many as you can. If you feel overwhelmed by that, that's why I am here, and I'm more than happy to help you with anything that I can do to ease the load off of your end also. So for qualifying events, that second sanctioned competition can be an in-house competition, as we mentioned before, which is solely your county. At each competition and qualifying event, each athlete must participate in the events that they plan on participating at Fall Fest. So say you go to the 5K on the runway or something, if that happens this year, that athlete should be practicing the same way that they will compete. As a coach, you already know that. I just wanted to reinstate that for everyone. So currently, we do not have any sanction forms that have come in at this time. I know that we're getting this webinar out a little earlier, as I wanted to do, so we could talk about this and just notify you now's the time to get those scheduled and get those forms into me, so that can be posted on the coach resource page and notify everyone else so that they can also participate. So that website you see there, charmcityrun.com, has multiple lists of 5K events that are offered this year. Some of them have been moved to virtual settings, but they are listed on that site if they are in person or virtual. And I believe that that site is up to date from what I saw earlier in this week. and there are a ton of events there. So for the rules, we go by the national governing body for athletics. We follow United States Track and Field. So we follow these rules unless for some reason it conflicts with Special Olympics rules. And in that case, we do follow the Special Olympics rules. So uniform or attire, obviously athletic apparel is required. You're running around, so we do not want to be wearing jeans. Ideally athletic shorts and pants. For tops, you can wear a singlet. Also a t-shirt and a sweatshirt is perfectly fine. Weather dependent, I guess, or your preference, as long as it does not have advertising. Watches or other timing devices are permitted, but no jewelry, medals, headphones, etc., unless that has to do with medical concern there. And in that case, the athlete, of course, can still wear that. Stud earrings and flat rings may be permitted at the official's discretion. At the start line, I know that we have someone that checks to make sure everybody's in the proper clothing. Didn't forget to take off some big necklace or headphones before they get into there. So please double check your athletes at practice, kind of remind them. That's a great way at the state competition for them not to be thrown off of or tell us that I wear my headphones at practice all the time. Just have them practice like they will be competing. It'll make it a better experience for everyone. With footwear, they may wear shoes or run barefoot. Shoes must be appropriate for athletic competition. Work boots, street shoes, and open-toed shoes are not permitted though. So all the starts will start with a mass start for all the divisions at a given distance. The course will be open in advance, and this goes for your qualifying competitions also. So I encourage you as a coach to walk that with your athletes or check out certain spots just so you're aware of what that course lay may look like in advance, so you can kind of coach your athletes in advance of that competition or qualifier there, especially if it's in an area that you're not familiar with. Spectators who run any distance with a competitor will cause the competitor to be disqualified. Obviously, parents or coaches cannot be running with the athlete or coaching them while they are participating. So the marking of the course we talked about earlier with those big orange traffic cones that will line the course at Fall Fest. There will also be personnel at the different locations, as we talked about. I know that there's some areas that are more confusing than others. So Ron and I work to make sure those volunteers are at the right spots to make everybody very aware of which direction they should be going, which turns, etc. So for all the events, the markings on the course should be identified early in the planning process and communicated to the rest of the people as soon as possible. That final map will be distributed or talked about also on that pre-competition webinar. And there will be a venue map on the coach's resource page after that final outline of the course is solidified. So with the 1K unified run and the walk and relays, so unified pairs must finish within 5 seconds of each other. Obviously, we want the unified partner to be on the same level as the athlete, and we also want the athlete to be on the same level as the unified partner. So combined times of both runners is the time for their team. Those are not separate times that are submitted, it is the total. So pairs may touch or hold hands, but it is not a requirement. Obviously, what you cannot do is pull or carry. Any other action like that will be deemed unsafe, and the athletes will be DQ'd. For the relay, a baton will be used along with a 30-meter exchange zone. So here you'll see your resources. The event guide is underway. Some work's been done on that. That will be distributed as soon as that is complete and also posted on the resource page. Our pre-competition webinar, October 6th, that will be happening at 7 p.m. You can see the registration link there, and feel free to click that once that's distributed or check out the coach's resource page. As a reminder, that LDR page is, at least what I've been updating, is the one that's under athletics, and at the bottom of the page, long distance running has its own section there. So that's where all of my updates have been going. So please check that out, along with, especially as we progress throughout the season with other upcoming qualifiers that come up. So there you can see the IAAF website for the resource there. Also where our main resource page is for Special Olympics, and then the breakdown into the long distance running page. So at this time, I'll open it up for any questions. I know that we went through that kind of fast, but I wanted to make sure we got through all the information along with being precise and respectful of everyone's time. I recognize a lot of you as returning coaches, which is great, but please feel free to ask any questions at this time. If you don't think of them, please feel free to email or call me. As you are aware, I'm happy to help you and get back to you as soon as I can.
Hey, John, this is Steve. In regards to your question about the 1,500 meter unified run,
Yeah.
I just checked in GMS from 2019, and it did not look like we had anybody listed in that event. And that may be why it was taken out, but that's definitely something. If you or Howard County or Montgomery have any participants you're looking at doing the 1,500 meter unified, let us know. We can definitely work with you on this.
Okay, I know in the past, one of our athletes has definitely needed it because he'll get lost out on the course, and I'm not sure if he's coming back or not. So I'll get back with you.
Okay, yeah, just keep us in the loop. We can definitely look at offering that if need be. And like I said, we'll work with you. So just let us know.
All right, thanks.
Anybody else? All right, like I said, if anything comes up, please don't hesitate reaching out. That's why I'm here. I try to always stress that and put that in my emails because that's my job. It's to help you along with a few other things. But that's one of my main goals here with Special Olympics. So thank you all very much for joining tonight. As a coach these past few years, I'm sure it's been difficult, but I really appreciate all your hard work. Look forward to working with you again this year. And I hope that everybody has a great night and a better rest of your week. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and again, as Ryan said, thank you, coaches. Without you guys, we don't have programs and the support of the athletes. So appreciate that. And the only thing I'll stress is with the COVID situation, everything else, just know that Special Olympics Maryland continues to monitor all the situations and everything through Special Olympics North America, Special Olympics International, with our local state regulations, et cetera. So I only say that because as you've known in the last year or so, we have had changes and updates. So just be patient. And if there are any changes, we'll definitely work with you guys, inform you guys, and through the area directors and possibly through you directly to coaches or as coaches. So fingers crossed, everyone. So appreciate your patience over the last year and really glad to get back to some sort of normalcy here for the athletes. I know it's been a struggle over the last year, so we appreciate all of your efforts.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good evening.
You too, John.
See you, John.
See ya.
See you guys.